Star Trek, Primitive Passenger, Season 5, Episode 5, Breaking Bonds. The sterile white surfaces of Empire North's cloning lab reflected harsh light as Kilana bent over her workstation, her violet eyes fixed on the genetic sequences scrolling across her display. Her fingers traced a particular pattern of base pairs, following their familiar dance across the screen. "There," she whispered, marking the sequence. "The loyalty encodings are anchored here." Tapping the screen. "Fascinating," Natima's voice carried from the adjacent station. The Cardassian scientist moved closer, her own work momentarily forgotten. "The redundancies are quite elegant." Natima placed her hand on Kilana's shoulder. "You're uncovering centuries-old secrets, Kilana. It's incredible work." As Kilana turned to respond, Ilara strode through the doors. "We need you both in ops. Lex has found something to do with shipping manifests." "The trace chemicals?" Natima asked, already saving her work with practiced efficiency. Kilana did the same, though her eyes lingered on her screen. "Right behind you," she finally replied. The three walked together through Empire North's corridors toward ops. Kilana noticed how Natima's movements remained precise and graceful, despite her excitement over their progress. The Cardassian scientist had a way of making everything seem like a carefully choreographed performance. In ops, they found Nolan and Lexa examining a complex network of trade routes displayed across the main view screen. Lexa looked up as they entered, her eyes bright with the thrill of discovery. "The chemical signatures are unmistakable," Lexa said, highlighting a series of waypoints. "They're routing the components through multiple Cardassian colonies and space stations, but the end destination is clear." Nolan turned to them both. "What can you tell us about this facility's defenses?" The display shifted as Kilana stepped forward, zooming in on the facility's location. "This facility is similar to ours, but it looks like they rely more on Jem'Hadar patrols," she said. "The Dominion relies heavily on the Cardassian defense grid here." "With good reason," Natima interjected, her fingers dancing across a secondary console. "These power signatures suggest integration with Cardassian shield harmonics." "My people have been busy. That's what concerns me," Lexa said. "The shipping patterns suggest significant Cardassian involvement. Their sensor nets are sophisticated, but predictable," Natima added with a slight smile, "especially if you understand the underlying architecture." Nolan studied the layout. "Could be an advantage. Cardassian security tends to be more predictable than Jem'Hadar aggression." He looked over to Natima. "Do they realize they're helping the Founders to breed their own replacements?" "Some of them are bound to figure it out. Cardassian military never trusts their leaders, so they'll pick out the same data we do." Kilana's voice tight with concentration. "But this facility," she manipulated the display, highlighting specific areas. "These energy readings are consistent with our most heavily fortified cloning centers. The Founders wouldn't place such valuable technology under purely Cardassian protection." "She's right." Ilara moved to another console, pulling up additional data. "Deep scan readings show Polaron signatures. They're masking their true defensive capabilities." Natima leaned closer to Nolan's console, her arm rushing his as she pointed out specific details. "Look here, the power distribution suggests a hybrid system. Cardassian shields with Dominion modifications." Kilana's hands stilled on her console, her attention drawn to the casual contact between them. The familiar ache of an emotion she wasn't supposed to feel rose in her chest. She forced her focus back to the tactical data. "The facility will have at least 3 Vorta administrators," she continued, her voice carefully neutral. "Standard protocol places them here, here, and here." She marked points on the display. "They'll be coordinating with a minimum of 2,000 Jem'Hadar troops. Here, right here." Lexa tapped a small metallic square. "Is this the entrance to their barracks, where all the hatchlings live while they grow up?" Everyone turned to Kilana, lowering her head, looking down. "Yes," was all she said. The Havoc hung motionless in the shadow of a massive gas giant, its dark hull barely visible against the void. On the bridge, Nolan studied the holographic representation of their target, a Dominion cloning facility burrowed deep into a titanium-rich asteroid. The facility's external defenses looked formidable, but nothing they hadn't handled before. "All drones in position," Lexa announced, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Attack formations programmed." Nolan nodded. "Let's introduce the Alpha Quadrant to our particular brand of diplomacy." The Havoc blinked into existence 3,000 kilometers from the asteroid, weapons hot. Before the facility's sensors could react, waves of massive black drones blinked into position on its perimeter. The first volley of defensive fire met empty space, the drones already blinking to new positions, their own weapons creating a deadly web of energy. External sensor arrays exploded, shield generators crumbled. Defense platforms meant to repel conventional attacks found themselves overwhelmed by targets that refused to follow normal laws of physics. "Their shield harmonics are years behind what we've seen in the Gamma Quadrant," Hilaire observed, monitoring the facility's rapidly failing defenses. "No adaptation to the feathering patterns." "They're about to learn," Lexa replied, directing her drones with savage precision. "Breach in sectors 3 and 7. External defenses neutralized." Nolan hammered at his console. "Time to clean house. Ilara, initiate wide area transport sweeps." Standard protocol parameters. Inside the facility, Jem'Hadar warriors vanished mid-stride, their atoms scattered into the corona of the system's sun. Panicked voices filled the comm channels as the facility's commanders realized what was happening. "Vorta life signs detected," Ilara reported, moving them to secure pattern buffers. A squadron of Jem'Hadar fighters emerged from concealed hangars in the asteroid's surface. They lasted seconds against Lex's drone swarm, their pilots joining their brethren in solar immolation. "Detecting power buildup," Lexa called out. "They're trying to overload their reactors." "Not today." Nolan's tapped the console 3 times. The Havoc powered up, its devastating particle beam, salvaged from that Borg sphere so long ago. The Havoc thrummed with power. Then the beam lanced out with surgical precision. The beam cut through the asteroid's surface, penetrating to the facility's reactor core. The explosion began as a ripple beneath the asteroid's surface. Fissures spread like spiderwebs through the rock. Secondary explosions blossomed from within as containment fields failed and power relays overloaded. Nolan could feel the power of the blast echo through the Havoc as he closed his eyes against the brilliance of the explosion before the vacuum pushed it back in on itself. He looked again to see debris expanding outward. "All priority targets eliminated," Ilara confirmed. "Jem'Hadar count 37,812. 3 Vorta in pattern storage." The asteroid split apart, fragments of rock and debris spinning into space. The remains of the cloning facility tumbled among the wreckage, atmosphere venting in crystalline plumes. "Clean up the pieces," Nolan ordered. "No salvage this time. I want everything reduced to atoms." Lex's drones moved through the debris field with mechanical efficiency, their weapons reducing chunks of asteroid and facility to dust. Nothing larger than a dinner plate would remain to hint at what had happened here. "Might have overdone it with the reactor core," Lexa said, satisfaction evident in her voice. "But the light show was impressive." "The Alpha Quadrant needed a demonstration," Nolan smiled. "Now they know what's coming." He studied the sensor readings from the battle. The facility's defenses had been significantly less sophisticated than those they'd encountered in their Gamma Quadrant raids. No sign of the automated platforms or enhanced shield harmonics they'd faced before. The Dominion's forces here were fighting yesterday's war, unaware of how the rules had changed. "Blake is home," Nolan commanded. "Let's see what our people make of the data we've collected. And make sure those Vorta are comfortable in their pattern buffers. They've got some explaining to do." With a flash of white light, the Havoc blinked away, leaving behind only a slowly dispersing cloud of debris and radiation. In command centers across the sector, Sensors recorded the destruction of yet another Dominion facility. The message was clear. Nowhere in either quadrant was safe from Nolan Mercer's campaign of calculated annihilation. In the dim light of the late-night lab, Kilana stood before her console, the soft glow of genetic sequences reflecting in her violet eyes. The facility's night cycle meant privacy. No Natima's calculating gaze. No distracting awareness of Nolan's presence. Her fingers trembled slightly as she traced the familiar patterns of Vorta DNA. The loyalty sequences she'd mapped earlier seemed to mock her, their elegant redundancies ensuring devotion to beings she no longer wished to serve. She thought of Nolan, his warmth beside her in those quiet hours before dawn, the way his breathing changed as he drifted toward sleep. Feelings she wasn't engineered to have, yet they burned in her chest with undeniable heat. The genetic display pulsed with new information as she isolated a particular sequence. Her breath caught. There, hidden within layers of seemingly essential code, lay the neural triggers that bound Vorta devotion to the Founders. "It's not fate," she whispered, marking the sequence. "It's just programming." The implications shook her. Freedom from the Founders' control was possible, terrifying and wonderful all at once. But the cost, she saved her work and encrypted it, buried beneath layers of routine research data. Some truths were too dangerous to face all at once. Besides, she had more immediate concerns, like the way her heart raced whenever Nolan smiled at her. A reaction no genetic programming could fully explain. The familiar configuration of DS9's command office brought a hint of irony to Nolan's expression as he sat across from Captain Benjamin Sisko. The room mirrored his own office on Empire North, or rather, his mirrored this one, given Terok. Nor was being built before Empot nor was started. Major Kira stood bent over, reading her pad as it sat on Sisko's desk, focused on its content and raising her mug for another pull of Raktajino. Though her focus remained on the pad, the subtle tension in her shoulders betrayed her discomfort with Nolan's presence. "I'm sure Starfleet Central Command will find a use for your Vorta friends," Sisko said, his deep voice carrying its usual measured authority. He held up the pad Nolan had provided, turning it slightly as if its contents might make more sense from a different angle. "I'll also relay this report on your raid to them as well." He set the pad down deliberately. "Do you mind telling me how you managed to find their cloning operation?" "It's all in the report, Captain," Nolan replied, rising from his chair with fluid grace that belied his centuries. "We were able to learn of some unusual chemical compounds needed for the cloning process, details we picked up in the Gamma." Kira's head snapped up from her reading. She stood upright, nearly snorting Raktajino from her nose. "Gamma Quadrant." The skepticism in her voice carried an edge of accusation. "How are you getting through the wormhole while it's mined?" "We get around, Major." Nolan's crooked smile didn't reach his eyes. "We've disrupted their efforts on the other side, to the point that they're making modifications on that side to respond to our tactics." Sisko leaned forward, his elbows coming to rest on his desk. "By we, you're referring to—" He left the question hanging, invitation clear in his tone. Nolan glanced down, a fleeting shadow crossing his features. The constant need to simplify his relationship with Alara and Lexa grated against him. To Starfleet, AIs were tools, not companions, not family. "Me and the Havoc, Captain. Just me and my ship. And you and your ship managed to get behind Cardassian lines and take out a heavily guarded cloning facility on your own." Kira's skepticism had evolved into outright disbelief, her words sharp with challenge. "It's a big ship, Major, with big guns." Nolan stared through her and let his voice take on a rougher edge, slipping into the persona Starfleet seemed to expect. The primitives with his crude methods. He'd learned long ago that playing to their assumptions often meant fewer questions, less scrutiny. He began toward the door. The artificial light of DS9's promenade cast harsh shadows as Nolan made his way through the crowd. Ahead, the familiar figure of Garrick emerged from the cross corridor. The Cardassian's eyes met his for just a moment before the spy executed a smooth about-face, his stride never breaking as he reversed direction. A faint, almost amused smirk, followed by the slightest eye roll, crossed Nolan's face as he picked up his pace. The chase, however brief, ended at Garrick's clothier's, where he found the tailor busying himself with an already immaculate rack of garments. "Well, hey, Garrick, I was hoping to find you here." Nolan's casual tone carried just a hint of mockery, given that he'd obviously followed the man into his own shop. He spread his arms wide, showcasing his black attire. "Do you have anything in black?" Garrick's hands moved restlessly among the hangers, shifting clothes from one spot to another with precise, nervous energy. "Ah, Mr. Mercer, how unexpected. Though one might argue that black is a rather limiting choice for one's wardrobe." "Heard any good rumors lately, Mr. Say?" "Garrick," Nolan pressed, enjoying the tailor's discomfort. "Just Garrick, thank you." His fingers traced the seam of a jacket with excessive attention. "And if you mean the jumping up and down and screaming that's been coming from Cardassia, yes, those rumors are quite loud." "You don't say." Nolan leaned against a display, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. "Not understanding the question, what I will say," Garrick continued, finally turning to face him, "is that everyone is trying to identify a potential new player. And unfortunately your former friends on Cardassia have thrown me under the bus," Nolan finished, his smile never wavering. Garrick's eye ridge twitched slightly at the idiom. "I'm not sure about the translation, but that's the gist of it. Yes, gruesome as it may be. Well, they know where to find me." Nolan executed a slow turn toward the door, never taking his eyes off the Cardassian. "I have a feeling I'll hear from them soon." As Nolan's footsteps faded down the promenade, Garrick let out a long breath. His hand reached out almost automatically, pulling a black jacket in Nolan's size from the rack. He studied it for a moment before returning it to its place with unnecessary precision. The shop felt smaller somehow, as if Nolan's presence had left an impression in the very air. Garrick wondered, not for the first time, just what game the man was playing, and whether Cardassia was ready for the consequences of crossing him. See, the massive observation deck of Empire North stretched before him, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of space traffic against the star-filled backdrop. Scattered groups of officers and civilians dotted the expansive chamber, their quiet conversations creating a gentle murmur that seemed to fade into the background. Nolan spotted Kilana immediately. She stood alone before the windows, her slender silhouette outlined by the glow of passing ships. The gentle curves of her form drew his eye, and a soft smile played across his lips as he watched her. The subtle way she held herself, somehow both precise and graceful. Before he could approach, she turned suddenly, as if sensing his presence. Her violet eyes found his instantly, and she rushed toward him with unexpected urgency. Nolan caught her in his arms, surprised by the intensity of her embrace. "How did you know I was here?" he asked, still adjusting to her sudden proximity. "I always know when you're here, Nolan," she whispered against his chest, her arms tightening around him. He held her close, assuming she'd been worried about his safety during the raid. But there was something different in her tension, something beyond simple concern for his safety. She pulled back slightly, her eyes searching his face. "Natima Colmac, do you want her?" The directness of the question caught him off guard. She's my scientist. Where's all this coming from?" Instead of answering, Kilana pressed herself against him, capturing his mouth in a fierce kiss. Her body molded to his, passion and desperation mingling in the way her fingers gripped his shoulders. The observation deck, the passing ships, the scattered onlookers, everything faded away except the raging fire between them. Later, in Nolan's quarters, soft starlight filtered through the viewport, painting patterns across tangled sheets. Kilana lay curled against him, her head resting on his chest, their breathing synchronized in the quiet darkness. Her fingers traced absent patterns on his skin as she listened to his heartbeat. Nolan stirred slightly, his arm tightening around her. In sleep, his features softened, the weight of centuries momentarily lifted. Kilana watched him, wondering if he could feel the truth of what she'd discovered in the lab, that her feelings for him weren't just programming breaking down, but something real growing in its place. She nestled closer, letting the rhythm of his breathing lull her toward sleep, knowing that tomorrow would bring new complications, new challenges. But for now, in the peace of these stolen hours, she allowed herself to simply exist in this moment with him. Calm. The comm badge chirped insistently in the darkness. Once, twice, 3 times. Kilana shifted, rolling onto her side with a soft murmur. Nolan moved with her, his larger frame curving around hers, his arm pulling her close. The warmth of skin against skin, the comfort of shared space drawing them both back toward deep sleep. Lexa materialized at the far end of Nolan's quarters, her footsteps purposeful as she approached the sleeping area. "Your comms are down. I wanted to let you know that I've found another source for." The words died in her throat as she registered the scene before her. Nolan's eyes opened slowly, heavy with interrupted sleep. But there was something else there, too. A darkness that spoke of older times, deeper places, a look that suggested his mind had been wandering paths best left unexplored. His arm remained possessively wrapped around Kilana's sleeping form. Lexa put her hand to her mouth, a gesture almost too human for an AI. Without a word, she double-tapped her comm badge and vanished, leaving behind only the ghost of her surprised expression in the dim starlight. In the restored quiet, Kilana stirred slightly, unconsciously pressing closer into Nolan's embrace. The moment hung suspended between sleep and waking, between past and present, between what was and what might be. The comm alert pulsed on Nolan's desk in ops. The familiar Vorta features of Weyoun appeared on the screen, his perpetual half-smile masking whatever agenda had prompted this unexpected contact. "Mr. Mercer," Weyoun's melodic voice carried its usual blend of courtesy and condescension. "I trust I find you well." "Weyoun." Nolan leaned back in his chair. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "The Founder wishes to meet with you." Weyoun's eyes took on that pose-born reverence that infected all Vorta when speaking of their gods. "For a peaceful discussion, of course. Recent events have drawn her attention." "Is that so?" Nolan kept his tone neutral. "And where would this peaceful discussion take place?" "We could arrange." "Here." Nolan cut him off. "Empire North. I'll clear the station of all personnel except my immediate staff." Weyoun's smile faltered slightly. He glanced off-screen, presumably consulting with the Founder herself. After a moment, his attention returned to Nolan. "That would be acceptable. However, the Founder must be allowed an escort. Myself and 2 Jem'Hadar guards will accompany her." 3 days, Nolan stated. 3 days, Weyoun agreed, his trademark smile returning. "The Founder looks forward to your hospitality." The screen went dark, not the contact he'd expected from the Dominion at all. But this seemed better than a rain of Jem'Hadar ships on Empire North. Nolan had to admit he was intrigued to learn what game the Founders were playing. But then he'd certainly find out in 3 days. Empire North's promenade gleamed under heightened illumination, every shop front and viewport brilliantly lit. The usual bustle and hum of commerce had been replaced by an almost cathedral-like silence, broken only by the subtle environmental systems cycling overhead. Even Pym's bar stood empty, its garish signs casting multicolored reflections across the polished deck plates. Nolan waited with Alara and Lexa near the central crossway, where the promenade's curved path offered the clearest lines of sight in both directions. The transport effect shimmered, materializing the female changeling with regal poise. Her liquid amber eyes immediately scanned the space, her expression hardening. "Where is my escort?" Her voice carried the edge of command. "And Weyoun, you had promised I could bring an escort." Nolan's eyes widened as realization struck. "Shit." Lexa covered her mouth with both hands. "The protocol." Nolan and Alara blurted in unison. "Get the Vorta back," Nolan demanded. Lexa nodded quickly, already accessing the pattern buffers. "I'm so sorry, Miss Founder." Nolan adopted a slightly submissive posture, fighting back inappropriate laughter. We completely forgot about a little transporter protocol we have here. Where are my Jem'Hadar? She demanded, her usually fluid features growing rigid. I'm really sorry, but they're gone. Nolan delivered the news with a wince. Your Jem'Hadar have been, well, vaporized. Again, I'm so sorry. Ilara, barely containing her own amusement, glanced at Lexa. Any luck there? Got him. Weyoun materialized near Lexa, his typical serene expression giving way to momentary confusion. I should be at the Founder's side, he announced, hurrying across the empty promenade toward his god. And where, may I ask, is the first? Don't ask, the Founder replied flatly. Weyoun's confusion deepened as he scanned the empty space. Calm yourself now, Weyoun. We have important matters to discuss with Mr. Prow. Mercer, like a switch, had been flipped. Weyoun's features smoothed into placid acceptance. The Founder had commanded calm, and calm descended. Fang? They walked the curved path of the promenade, the Founder and Nolan side by side, their respective entourages following at a respectful distance. Their conversation carried no hint of tension or raised voices, just two powers in the galaxy, discussing matters of consequence. The Founder glanced back at their followers, then returned her attention to Nolan. Without a word, they both continued forward, leaving Weyoun, Ilara, and Lexa behind. Their path took them to the observation deck, where they settled into seats before the sweeping view of stars. From a distance, they might have been old acquaintances sharing confidences, their body language suggesting neither threat nor submission. Just two beings, shaped by centuries of experience, having a conversation that would echo across two quadrants. The details of their discussion remained between them, carried away by the subtle circulation of recycled air through Empire North's empty corridors. As Nolan and the Founder headed down the promenade, Weyoun turned his attention to Ilara and Lexa. His perpetual smile faded as he stepped closer, head tilting like a predatory bird. I had heard a rumor, he said, his melodic voice carrying an unfamiliar edge, from a Cardassian freighter pilot. He told me that Mercer had a Vorta woman imprisoned here as his personal slave. His eyes darted between them. Now I see that it's true. Ilara and Lexa exchanged glances, their expressions carefully neutral. Suddenly, Weyoun's features contorted with revulsion. I can smell her all over him, he hissed, his usually controlled demeanor cracking. All over this station. Ilara raised her hands in a placating gesture. It's not what you think. I know exactly what's going on here, and it disgusts me. The words seemed to physically pain him. I could understand if she was tortured, drugged, coerced, but she gave herself. His voice trembled with barely contained outrage, the very concept seeming to offend his genetic programming. You can tell all that from a smell? Lexa blurted, curiosity overtaking discretion. We can't be drugged or poisoned. There's no chemical distress markers, but there are. Ugh. Weyoun's natural eloquence failed him, the implications too revolting to voice. His expression shifted from disgust to threat. If you so much as mention this abomination in front of the Founder, He trailed off, something catching his attention. Weyoun's eyes narrowed as he studied them more closely. Where are you, really? What type of beings are you? I feel as though I'm talking to the wall. He peered behind them. Ilara and Lexa simply smiled, their expressions mirror images of serene amusement. The Vorta's latent telepathic abilities had found nothing to grasp, no minds to read, no emotions to sense, just the echo of presence, like searching for substance in a hologram. The sound of approaching conversation announced the return of Nolan and the Founder. Not a word, Weyoun hissed, his face instantly composing itself into its usual mask of devoted servitude as he resumed his position. The moment hung between them, two artificial beings watching a genetically engineered one prepare to serve his god, each carrying secrets that could shatter empires. Eek. Epilogue. The night cycle had settled over Empire North. While there was certainly no day or night, inhabitants had to sleep sometime, so most coordinated cycles with DS9 and Bajor's capital in Anchala, with most systems running at minimal power. Nolan stood at the viewport in his quarters, an extra-large cup of supplement 14 Beta-7 in his hand as he watched distant ships pass. The comm chirped. "Nolan, may I?" Ilara asked. Nolan double-tapped his comm badge, and Ilara materialized beside him. "So, are you going to tell me what you and the Founder discussed, or do I have to guess?" Nolan's lips quirked. Mutual destruction, naturally, though she seemed more interested in establishing boundaries than making threats. An ever-diplomatic Founder? That's nothing new. Ilara settled into a nearby chair, though I suppose watching her Jem'Hadar vanish into thin air might have tempered her usual approach. The protocol incident wasn't exactly the smooth first impression I'd planned. He chuckled, taking a swig of his root beer float. But it did establish certain realities. Speaking of realities, Ilara's tone turned playful. "Did you know Weyoun can smell Kilana's presence all over the station?" He was quite scandalized. Nolan nearly choked on his drink. What? Oh, yes. Apparently, Vorta have quite the sense of smell. He was thoroughly disgusted by the implications. Her eyes sparkled with amusement, though not as disturbed as he was by his inability to read Lexa or myself. Poor thing couldn't figure out why we felt like talking to walls. The Founders gave them more abilities than they advertise, Nolan mused. Makes you wonder what else they built into their servants. Like the capacity for real emotion, Ilara asked softly, or the ability to break their programming. Nolan's expression sobered slightly. The Founder has no idea we're decimating their forces in the Gamma Quadrant. She thinks containing us here in the Alpha is their biggest concern. Let them think that. Ilara stood, moving to join him at the viewport. Meanwhile, Kilana's research progresses, and their grip on their servants weakens by the day. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Finally, Nolan smiled. "You know what's really ironic? After all that posturing and negotiation, we basically agreed to stay out of each other's way, while having absolutely no intention of doing so." Diplomacy, Ilara laughed. "Though I do hope we remember to disable the protocol next time we have visitors. Explaining to a Founder that we've accidentally vaporized her honor guard isn't the best way to start negotiations." "I don't know," Nolan grinned. It seemed to get the point across rather effectively. Their quiet laughter drifted through the empty corridors of Empire North, a moment of lightness in a war that grew more complex with each passing day.